Good evening. Global economic growth will gradually pick up in the year. Well, in the year I'm talking about is 2014, although there are still some real risks out there. European meltdown due to housing shock or country default. I think most housing prices in London are reflecting this and the risk associated with that. Oil price shock in the Middle East, or more recently, shall I say, conflict in Ukraine. US economy stagnates following removal of fiscal support, or will China's bubble actually burst? When we then move across, when we move to look across at Europe, after 6 quarters of contraction, the Eurozone has begun to recover. However, fiscal austerity is here and will remain some time. We've got weak consumer finances. We've also got tight credit conditions, and excessive industrial capacity will restrain Europe's expansion. And it's a game of winners and losers. Germany, France, and the UK are likely to be the winners in the north, and most of our southern partners are expected in Italy and Spain to have a far rockier recovery. In the UK, business confidence, accelerating production, and new order books need to be balanced again by tight fiscal policies, which will continue for several more years. And the next election will be, again, from both political parties, will be around further cuts. Also, we need to take into account the strength of sterling in a global economy and the growth of our export markets. If we look at oil, oil is expected to fall throughout the course of 2014, and our forecasts predict a high long-term price floor of between $80 to $90 a barrel, driven by the need to maintain a return on investment from higher costs of production. It has been argued from some economists, in order to keep peace in the Middle East, you actually need a price between $150 and $200 a barrel, which is another interesting debate we'll keep for later. Geopolitical risk is critical to the current price direction, as the overall balance appears, in our view, to warrant a lower price of oil. Currently, the market was moving in line with predictions until Ukraine happened, which then demonstrates the significant influence of geopolitical risk, and that is probably the main influencer. It's also worth noting here that Russian gas imports are indexed to oil, normally on a 20-year or longer deals, and therefore gas prices in Europe are dictated by oil prices. And no matter what Mr. Hague says that we're going to take less gas for Russia, I think Putin has got us by our goldens. If I move across and talk about gas, really looking at gas in the short term, I would say, 2014, we expect to be a low point for European demand, and we don't really expect recovery back until the levels previously experienced until at least 2026. We've got significant demand in Asia, who will pull most of the LNG that's coming in for Qatar and coming on stream to from Australia, will go to China, or it will go out to Japan, who, as we know, have got significant issues around their nuclear reactors being offline. We're entirely dependent upon increased supplies from Russia to fill the gap, and I say we hope. And from a trader's perspective, there's an extra S in there, we expect prices around gas to remain firm over the short period. Looking slightly further ahead at the longer term drivers, really reduced growth in UK power generation is resulting in reduced demand for gas as an input fuel at a time where we've got high global gas prices, huge amounts of coal, as a previous speaker talked about, and we expect to have low coal prices around until about 2020, which becomes another interesting debate around the carbon price. Europe's requirement for gas imports are going to grow substantially as our indigenous supply in the north starts going further and further down, and huge demand growing in southern Europe to meet this. Price formulation will continue to evolve. It's still a battle between oil indexation and gas to gas. Out in Europe, majority of gas consumers in the industrial commercial world bought on oil indexation to about 3 years ago. And I'd say that's almost now completely the opposite, which is causing huge financial impacts to companies such as E.ON. I think E.ON reported a $1 billion euro hit last year because they're still buying an oil indexation against gas to gas. But that will really have little impact on long-term levels of prices in Europe. On the back of that, I think European energy policy, if we do have an energy policy, I definitely know we haven't got one in the UK, it's going to be a real key driver of demand of growth in the longer period. It's going to be a question of what are they going to do and which direction actually they're going to go in. This is an example of international gas prices. We've got Asia in the green, Henry Hub in the yellow, as you can see with the advantage they've got a shale. And then you've got oil indexation, which is the red in Europe line, and you've got NBP TTF, which is the actual the spotted line that comes through. And as you can see, there's a direct comparison that oil indexation always brings up the NBP price and TTF. One thing I would say about Henry Hub, everybody talks about cheap US gas. It's great, but they can't export it. They built 20 LNG stations to import gas, not to export it. And I think they're trying to convert 2 at the moment. But that's likely to have that's about 5 years away before we really see an impact. Move across to look at power. If we look at the short term, really power prices have plunged to new lows due to a combination of weak demand, continued renewables expansion, failure of the EU ETS, and falling global coal prices. And I'm saying if we look back over history and say, where should actually power prices actually be? And most recently, really around mild, wetter weather that we've had in place. Looking slightly further ahead, before I get out, I just want to mention a bit on coal prices. This is, if we look at coal from a previous speaking, this looks at prices from April 2012 to March 2014, where you see coal prices drop from 125 to 85 pounds a tonne. They were actually 72 pounds a tonne last week, so almost halving. However, I would say, don't forget that the US dollar has got stronger compared to the rand in South Africa and also the Australian dollar. Over the last 12 months, 40 to 45% of all generation in the UK has come from coal. So Dashford renewables were burning a lot more recently, which is even higher than a previous speaker talked about in 2013 and 2012. Looking at longer term drivers, a lot of discussion about retiring, mothballing our aging generation fleet. If I produced and built power stations, I've been strongly encouraging the British government to build more. However, our analysts predict that we have absolutely ample generation around in the UK. What the question is not the amount of generation, but around security supply. And security supply and the price is a complete red herring. What they actually really mean is price. We can have as much energy as we want in the UK. Are we prepared to pay the price to get it? And most manufacturers said past a certain level in the UK, we'll simply stop production. So it's not a question about building, it's a question of whether we can afford to pay, because the UK market is now a global market. And also, on top of that, really, how will coal and carbon markets develop going forward? Coal, if you look at coal, freight is all-time low. Cost of production is fairly low after a peak, and therefore coal prices are going to continue low up to about 2018, 2019, which means lower markets. Will the European government do anything about the EU ETS at a time when energy prices in Europe are fairly high? I doubt very much. This is a graph of power prices. The important one to look at, this is the UK up at the top here. Carbon price fall, absolutely fantastic. We pay 20 euros a megawatt more an hour greater than you pay in the Netherlands. So if I was an industrial player, I'd be saying, hang on, great for a renewable, but I'm moving my factory abroad because I can't afford to compete. And these are some of the other European prices. And we're predicting that prices are going to really stay where they are at this sort of level until about the mid-20s going forward, as you can see from the predictions we got through. But UK prices will be some of the most expensive in Europe. Interesting, if you then move across and look at price evolution, important bit to look at, it's a bit on the right-hand side. This is how power spot prices compare. As you can see, in Germany they've fallen, France they've fallen, Italy they've fallen, in the UK they've gone up. Okay, and so that's what you're faced with in UK power. I'm also going to talk about non-energy costs. Why? Because for the majority of industrial and commercial users out there, when you pay your final price, you pay your wholesale market price, and then there's the embedded benefits, transportation, balancing, taxes going forward. And these are rising. These are rising at a rapid rate, really, for support for renewable energy, investment in smart grid technology and infrastructure, and government regulation. And if you look at this graph, this compares, the blue bit is the energy price, this is the non-energy price. If you look to countries such as Germany, who are leading the way to smart grid renewable energy markets, as we are doing, roughly 50% of their power bill is non-energy costs. The UK is going in that direction very, very quickly over the next few years. Then also, what are industrial and commercial companies actually doing out there? Well, most of them now looking at generating their own, whether it's looking at CHP, maximizing standby generation to what can we do with that, alternative sources, energy from waste, renewable energy on site through either using their own waste products, or what they're actually doing is putting up solar panels on their factory roofs or putting up wind turbines on site. We're also seeing some of our bigger customers really putting in place long-term power purchase agreements with third parties. This is really to hedge out pricing risk going forward, and also about securing energy. Examples have been McDonald's, Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's. The UK government has recently fixed one for 20 years in July 13, £56 fixed, no indexation for 20 years. And the other companies have ranged in prices from £52 to £70, with a length of PPA from 30 to 20 years. There are ample independent developers around. The question of who can actually make the commercial model work. We have on our books, I think 316 developers at a certain stage. Some of them are definitely going to make it, and some of them will struggle to make it. And that really comes around the price in the market, counterparty credit, fuel supply, and a proven technology. Atkins covered some of those areas for you. And the main areas of growth from industrial and commercial is really about energy from waste. What do we do with our waste products? Anaerobic digestion, biomass, and intermittent around solar and wind, which is really more around the FIT regime that we're seeing in place. Also, we're seeing a huge focus on energy efficiency. There is limited CapEx available in Europe, and therefore most companies are looking at us, or what I call the zero-cost OPEX solution. And we're seeing a big rise back to energy performance contracting, energy services companies arising, whereby third parties are providing the capital, taking on the risk to deliver the savings, and then sharing the saving model that goes on. And that is proving to be very, very popular. And industrial and commercial companies, people like Diageo, Unilever, Lafarge, Umicore, Michelin, as a few examples, are now moving away from the project-by-project approach, and they're looking about solution delivery. So looking for people to come into organizations and look at the whole piece, the sort of holistic approach, and are looking for single expertise across energy price risk, energy efficiency, and carbon legislation, because it's getting more complex out there. And when we talk about energy, when I talk about to an INC, an industrial and commercial company, when they talk about energy, depending on who I talk to, whether it's the CFO, the guy in charge of being green and carbon legislation, or the engineer, each of them has a different view. But most of them are looking at the 5 pillars: power, waste, water, buildings, and transportation. So, finally, what does the future look like? This is my view. Energy is getting a lot more complex. And I would say, from working in North America and around the world, I would say that Europe is in real risk of being left behind. EU ETS has been a false economy that we are actually doing stuff. and in certain areas in the US, I would say in some areas they're 10 months ahead. Examples of that, Texas produces the most amount of wind in the US, the oil state, and they also invented the negawatt out there out of interest. California, no petrol cars past 2020, and no non-renewable generation allowed to be built past 2030. Presidential decree, all government buildings by 2016 have to reduce their energy costs by 16%, have to have an energy manager and a building management system. And they're all doing it not to save carbon because it saves money. And there's a growing movement called 2050, driven by the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is no oil, no coal, and no nuclear by 2050. And just finally in the US is about to become the largest exporter of oil in the world. That's a side issue. Key trends that I see, if you look at distributed generation, I see as the main one. No more big power stations being built, electric motors, energy performance contracting, smart grid infrastructure investment, but also backed by cyber security. The government's become very aware it's very easy to blow up a power line. And if you just look at the recent floods, the impact that had, but there's also a terrorist impact. Huge amount of money into fuel cells and storage. You've now got 24-hour solar in Africa, where they store a lot of the heat in salt saline solution and then compress it at night, and it carries on generating electricity during the day. And we're seeing buildings like this, transportation and power demand all linked together. So you have electric cars downstairs and you take them home and you recharge them at home. It's all linked onto one power grid. And then just like we saw the combustion revolution that we had the computer revolution, we had the mobile revolution. My last comment of the evening is, are we going to see a similar revolution to the mobile communications and see the emergence of a new business model, whether that's Google, Apple, or Lockheed Martin, who are moving very strongly? Will they be the next energy company of the future? Thank you very much.